to my dungeon.
Welcome to Kuldrin's Crypt. I'm your host, Master Kuldrin. If you're new to the show, we use our combined 30 years of experience to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions or visit the crypt at kuldrinscrypt.com. On this episode of the Crypt, we're going to talk about the difference between hurt and harm. But first, good morning, fun size.
Good morning, Master Kuldrin.
Ooh, you're sounding sexy this morning.
I'm actually just really laid back because you wrote the show notes, and now I get to kind of reverse positions with you a little bit. It's nice for a switch, I gotta say.
Well, you know, with you dealing with burnout and really pushing yourself to do this because you do love it so much, and we all know that, and we're grateful for you. But burnout, as we talked about in that episode, very real. And with this topic, you know, it's something that I'm very passionate about because of my love of impact play and knife play, wax play, you know, all these things that bring the ouchie. So I just had to try to do what I could to help you out a little bit. I don't want to cause you any more burnout than what you've already got going on.
Well, I'm happy to say that I am actually starting to bounce back in great part to your support and respect.
Yay!
So thank you for writing these, but I will definitely be taking the reins back over in that department.
Well, I can't wait to hear what you've got to say because, like you said, this is flipped around. So normally I kind of know your point of view coming into it. So, yeah, this is going to be even more interesting than normal for me. Let me hit the rules to love by, and then we can jump straight into the topic as we usually do, where I will be giving you a definition. Talk about changing things up.
Right?
All right, so rules to love by, ladies and gentlemen. Rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, Kink-I. That's KNKI, stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. That comes from the Kink-I app, available on all platforms. And rule number 3, the quote from Mr. Paul Young. Submission is not about authority, and it's not about obedience. It's all about relationships of love and respect. Some of the most important words I've ever heard. All right, so as I just promised, the definition, BDSM definitions for hurt and harm as defined by me. Hurt, the intentional physical and or psychological trials that are either self-inflicted or afflicted upon a typically masochistic person consensually participating in a BDSM scene for the purpose of physical or psychological and or sexual pleasure. The definition that I come up with for harm is the intentional or unintentional physical and or psychological trials that are either self-inflicted or afflicted upon a typically masochistic person consensually or non-consensually participating in a BDSM scene that often have immediate and lasting psychological and or physical and or sexual negative effects. So the main thing there obviously is the last part, that harm, that lasting effects. And lasting can be short-term lasting, but we're going to get into all of that. How do you like my definitions on those?
They're interesting. There are a few wording choices that I would not have used, but I'm going to let it go because we are different people.
Oh no, let's jump into it. What is your you define it?
Okay. So the parts that I would definitely question about your definitions is that you say that hurt is intentional trials, but sometimes we can hurt our partner unintentionally. And it's not something that is harmful to them. It might be they were tied for 10 minutes too long, so their muscle's a little sore, so they're experiencing hurt. But it's not harmful to them at that point. Whereas harm, I definitely agree with your definition there, that it is something that causes a lasting effect on the person. And it may not be something that is always on the surface of that person with harm that's done to them, but there are certain triggers that can bring it back to the forefront. And that's where the lasting part comes.
Okay. I can see that. The reason why I went so strict with it in this intentionality is because I want to point out, and we'll get into this later on, but we can accidentally harm someone. And even if it's just tying someone, say, breast tying, which from what I understand, obviously I've never experienced this myself, but you keep somebody 10 minutes too long in that kind of tie, and it's going to be really painful, more so than some of the other ties. And that is an unintentional, or maybe it was intentional to carry it on a little bit, but to go past the point that you should, whether you mean to or not, is harm. And that is where the immediate lasting and that defining of lasting, whether it's, lasting can be just a few seconds, and that can be a traumatic experience for somebody that will create anywhere from a minor to a major form of PTSD. Mm-hmm. So, and I've been in that position before where it's been something that was accidental. And that's what I'm trying to do with these definitions, is show that even in an accidental situation and something that is minor and that doesn't last is still really considered harmful. It's one of those things where, like, if I wrap somebody with a flogger or dragon tail and they've got that immediate, oh my God, you wrapped me, and then I immediately go in to soothe it and I make an apology for it, I still, in that specific moment when that wrap occurred, that was a harmful thing. Now, obviously, it's not going to last. Say I just did it intentionally over and over and over, and then they're going to be very psychologically scarred because I've intentionally violated it. But I think it's important to recognize both aspects of that. Does that make more sense to you?
Well, it made sense the way you had initially said it. Like I said, I just had a few snippets to throw in, as I usually do.
You're snarky this morning.
I really am.
I originally said it. Oh, God. All right. So let's get into the history. A brief
Yay!
Yay!
I love history. No, go ahead.
Would you? Okay. All right. So a brief history on hurt and harm. Flogging and self-flagellation goes back thousands of years. We've talked about this over and over, that it's an incredibly old practice, but it was part of most, if not all, civilizations throughout history. And of course, these cave paintings that we've talked about several times that depict people flogging themselves. In the late 17th century, George Jeffreys of Welsh Providence, better known as the Hanging Judge, and I hear there's a movie coming out about this, which I can't wait to see, and you being a history buff, I'm sure you'll find it interesting too. But he obviously earned his reputation, but it extended way beyond the gallows, way beyond hanging people, having sentenced a young woman to a lashing at the rear of a cart. And yeah, this was before motors. He advised the executor of the punishment, and this is a direct quote: "Hangman, I charge you to pay particular attention to this lady. Scourge her soundly, man. Scourge her till her blood runs down. It is Christmas, a cold time for madam to strip in. See that you warm her shoulders thoroughly." And so, 17th century. Hurt and harm is talked about in every monotheistic religion and most non-monotheistic religions for both the purpose of punishment and enlightenment. This one is a fun fact that I find amazingly fascinating. The U.S. Army abolished flogging on August 5th of 1861. Until then, it was a major part of things. However, other direct corporal punishments were still used off the books into the mid-1900s, and non-direct corporal punishment, such as running, push-ups, and a plethora of other physical activities, commonly referred to as exercise, will forever be used in the military around the world as an effective method for punishment, training, and psychological strengthening of our soldiers. So that one, a lot of people don't realize that flogging was a thing in the military. Cathartic flogging, one of my most funnest of things because I love the therapeutic side of it. This is a term that was coined by Master Skip Chasey, wherein he defined it as merging the erotic with the ecstatic. It has been defined by Master Tano, who is now known as pretty much the world premier expert in cathartic flogging. He's the founder of the MTTA and the executive producer of the Master Slave Conference. He defines it as a spiritual healing that is erotic and sometimes a teleporting experience created by the exchange of energy between the participants. He has also referred to it by saying that it is the exorcism of your demons. So, yeah, that's why I really love the cathartic flogging. A lot of times when we talk about the psychology of BDSM, and you and I have both said, in fact, one of the big things about your interview way back when was talking about how it's not therapy. And I remember vividly asking you the question, how you felt about that. And we very much agree on that point, that BDSM is not to be used as your core therapy. But we also come to things in this conversation that we had where we stated that it is an excellent add-on to therapy.
Yep.
And I think that's why I love the cathartic flogging so much. But yeah, there's just a brief history. So I know you being the little switch that you are,
yeah.
I'm sure you've got a few reasons why you like to get hurt.
I do, but in order to talk about them, we really have to talk about my biggest fetish, which is a blood fetish. And anyone that's read my Pet Life journal, I guess we'll call it, because I only have one post in there, and it is about blood fetishism, knows how passionately I feel about this. And I believe I actually had this conversation with you, Master Kuldrin, where I had talked about the reason why blood was so important to me is that when you hit that point of pain where the blood is drawn, it's almost like a baptism as far as I'm concerned. It's very cathartic in and of itself. So it really is something that can wash away all the stresses, all the pains. And when I say pains, I do mean the mental and emotional pains, less so the physical pain, because you find strength in the physical pain that you can endure a lot of times from the submissive perspective, which we're going to talk about a bit more. But I mean, that's where I come from with it.
Yeah. And on that writing, I've got to say, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not checked that out, and I actually, with your permission, can I put that as a blog post?
Go ahead.
On the website?
Go ahead.
Okay. Because it is really that good. It has such an intense, beautiful, and sexual, and logical, and emotional. I mean, it hits on every single aspect. I remember the first time that I read it, it impacted me enough that I've gone back and read that several times. And I don't think I've actually ever talked to you about it other than just...
No, you haven't.
Maybe one little comment or something. But yeah, it's beautifully written. You really should put more up there.
We'll see about that.
You're a very prolific writer when you will do it.
It's more about making the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, now I definitely understand that. So hurt and why it's good for us and helping us to learn about ourselves. Think of the unnamed character played by Edward Norton in the movie Fight Club. He had never been in a fight, and you've seen this movie.
It's one of my favorites.
It's definitely in my top 5. So he had never been in a fight. He had no clue of his inner strengths, but it was through the fighting that he learned just how strong of a person he really was. So it often does the same thing for us to experience this hurt. Of course, it's without the imaginary friend that was represented by Brad Pitt's character, known as Tyler Durden. But I think that is kind of a very mansplaining way to think of it. But it certainly fits to me. Only through our biggest challenges can we find our true inner selves, and can we find out how strong we really are. And that doesn't mean that walking away and not being able to endure is weak, because sometimes it takes more strength to walk away than it does to stand there and take it. So that's an interesting aspect on it as well. Thoughts?
My thoughts, I'm actually going to save after you hit this next point.
Okay. One of my favorite sayings is that life isn't about the destination, but about the journey. And for some, experiencing hurt is a foreign concept or a fantasy that is really exciting and intriguing. I mean, when you think about when you first got into this and that excitement, that frenzy that it sends you into, and it wouldn't send you into a frenzy if it wasn't exciting and intriguing. But for others, it's a very scary thing. And that in itself can be very erotic. When you think about the primal instinct, most people are very aware of the fight or flight instinct. But what nobody really talks about, or very few realize, is that it's not just fight or flight. It's actually fight, flight, freeze, feed, or freak. Or get your freak on.
I was about to say, don't say that word.
So yeah, there's what, the 5 F's, not just the fight, flight, or freeze. There's 2 more to it. So that brings out the eroticism of it all. Really, when you think about it. Going back to Fight Club, another scene from it that I love is when they're riding in the car and Edward Norton's imaginary friend, Tyler, talks him into taking his hands off the steering wheel. And then, of course, they crash. It shows him stepping on the gas. They speed up. They go through some cones from a construction zone, down a hill, flip the car, and everybody's crawling out of the car looking all beat up because, well, they just flipped a car. And Brad Pitt is all excited and he's like, hey, man, you just had a near-life experience. And the first time I saw that hit me, because it's not the whole cups half full, cups half empty. The point is that the cup has water. And so often we're so focused on trying to figure out whether it's half full or half empty, we forget to experience life. So it's very often with bottoms and subs that I play with, that's one of the things that they talk about in hurt. Because, I mean, everybody knows me by now. They know I want to find out the why of why do people do this? What is it to you? Because that helps me become a better top and a better dominant. And it's that experiencing of life in that moment where everything else disappears and the mind is clear and you can have that magical moment through this hurt. And at this point, I also want to recognize that I do understand very much that this isn't for everyone, but in general with BDSM and kink, obviously that's what we're talking about here today. Are you still saving your thoughts, or do you want to go ahead and share something?
I'm going to go ahead and share them. And to me, it's as much about life as it is BDSM, because I see the two as one and the same as far as I'm concerned. In my life, whenever I've faced trials, whether they're trials with family, friends, work, relationships, there has always been a moment of pain, of hurt, physical, mental, emotional, in which just for a second, I thought, maybe I cannot endure this. Maybe this is the thing that will somehow end life as I knew it. And there have been times when my life has drastically changed from the hurt. But I've always come out to the other side. And I feel like those experiences in life have taught me more about myself, more what I can endure, more about the hurt that I can take than anything else, than any flogging or whipping or caning or any of those moments. But at the same time, I can look back at those moments, the floggings, the whippings, the canings, and go, that really hurt, but it was good. It was good for me. And I come out of them feeling pride in myself that I endured it, that I keep going. And the same applies to those trials in life and those life lessons. You come out enduring and feeling stronger and feeling pride in who you are. And like you said, sometimes you have to walk away from certain situations and certain people. And it's okay, because you have taken that experience and learned from it. You're growing, you're taking your personal journey a step further.
Yeah.
And that doesn't stop until we die.
And on that note, because you did address some situations where there were thoughts at times of giving up, of just walking away from life itself. You know, Chester from Lincoln Park, Anthony Bourdain that just took his own life this week.
Kate Spade,
Vern Troyer, better known as Mini-Me. So many people, of course, the accidental deaths from drug overdoses, which really, they're classed as accidental because it's an overdose. But if you're going down that road of such intense drug use, that's really intentional when you really break it down, because you don't get into that to to expect to live long once it becomes that point of addiction. I mean, I think logically, and this is speaking as someone who has been in recovery for 18 years, when I woke up one day and realized that the majority of my day was chasing down that high, I knew that I was on the path to death. So everything that I did after that moment to chase that high, I knew was leading to the end of my life if I didn't do something about it. And so it became a choice to quit, to get the help and all that. But I bring this up because this is very much a big thing in our society right now. On the news, a lot of famous people dropping around us. 2 weeks ago, I lost someone that I'd known since I was 6. She was a friend of the family growing up. She was the person that cut my hair. I am friends with her children and her nieces, and she had a medication change. And 2 weeks after her med change, and this was just a mild antidepressant, she took her own life. So if this is you, and I've received some emails from listeners that are going through some very deep, dark depression, reach out, send us an email, call the National Suicide Hotline. They've got a text number now, but reach out. And I don't want to bring this down or make this big public service announcement, but at the same time, with my years working in mental health and what I've gone through with my own personal depressions throughout my life, it takes 1 second to reach out that can save your life, especially when 98% of people who survive a suicide attempt will say that immediately after whatever they did, whether it was Kevin Hines, who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and lived through it, someone who's slit their wrists or whatever, they all say that as soon as they did that action that they intended to lead to their death, 98% of people immediately regretted it and wanted to take it back. So reach out to somebody. But anyway, let's move on with hurt versus harm, and we'll bring the mood back up because we're going to talk about something that I kind of ragged on you a little bit. I remember when I said it and you immediately said, I knew you were going to have fun with that one. But stimulation in why is hurt good for us? And it's because another reason, this is reason number 3, we had hurt helps us to learn about ourselves. Hurt helps us to experience life. And then finally, stimulation. Psychological stimulation, such as catharsis, which we've talked about. This is a state of peace where everything else falls away, and we are simply able to process and heal. And I say a state of peace, even though there's very often a lot of, that Oprah ugly cry going on and just this immense, painful release. But the painful part of it just lasts for a few moments. After that, then it quickly turns into tears of joy in most cases. And I've done a lot of this. Literally a few thousand times have I experienced this with someone else, because, as I've said, this is something that I consider myself an expert in and have had a lot of training and understanding in how this works. But sometimes physical hurt can help you to reach this catharsis and let go of mental and emotional pain or stress. And catharsis just simply is incredibly healing. Another reason, growth. Reaching a new peak of what you can endure as a submissive is a great learning experience. From the dominant standpoint, it can also offer lessons in control and care. Overall, the hurt that we share allows relationships to grow and run much deeper. And then, of course, these are the psychological reasons. And obviously, when you talk about stimulation, there's also the sexual aspect. And a masochist will certainly receive sexual stimulation from it, because as a masochist, pain from hurt is a wonderful type of stimulation. Just as with experiencing pleasure, endorphins are released due to these sensations. So it brings it all.
Yep.
I think it's safe to say that I know you pretty freaking well.
Yeah.
And
pretty well.
And I know that you've got some thoughts on these, and I'm really hoping that you care to go ahead and share them, because I'm really chomping at the bit to listen to what you've got to say about the stimulation side of hurt.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump back up to catharsis, and I'm gonna be like you, and I'm gonna use a movie analogy. V for Vendetta, one of my favorite movies too.
Oh, excellent movie.
The scene where Evie is taken out into the rain for the first time after being tortured for months. She has experienced an intense level of pain, and she went through it all to find that 1 inch of herself, that one part of herself that would always endure, even into death. And she steps outside into the rain and she throws her hands up and she starts crying and screaming. That is absolute catharsis.
Yeah.
There's no other visual for people that haven't experienced it that I could think of to really let that sink into their brains of what that looks like.
And a lot of people misread that scene, kind of like the end of Braveheart, where he's laying on the table being stretched and gutted and screams freedom. But that is not what that is.
No, it's not. It's catharsis. It's letting that part of her endure no matter what.
In fact, I think I've kind of found that as an interesting test of where people are with their BDSM lifestyle, or whether or not they're a participant. If you talk to them about that particular movie scene, somehow bring it up in a conversation. It almost seems that the ones that have experienced catharsis read the scene correctly. And yes, I will say correctly, because that is absolutely what is meant by that, and how you described it, as you are aware. But yeah, that's a beautiful comparison. I love that. And if you haven't seen it, check out that movie, V for Vendetta, to see exactly what Fun Size is talking about. Phenomenal comparison.
And I'm going to go back to the second point of stimulation, the growth. And we said that letting hurt be shared amongst our relationships helps that relationship grow. And that really goes back to the fact that nobody wants to love a perfect little Sandra D, Susie Q that never has any faults or never has anything bad to happen to them. You don't like that person. You've met that person in your life somewhere and you hated them. And you may not have known about the hurt because it wasn't shared with you, but you hated them because you saw them as being perfect and flawless and nothing bad ever happened to them. And the truth is, when we share hurt with a partner, we do develop a greater emotional bond with that person. And that's true of our friendships. That's true with our coworkers. That's true with every relationship in our lives.
Yeah. And that really comes down to the basis of what relationships, how they grow, is through that bonding. I mean, you can have fun in thinking about my friendships with people. I have some people that I consider them really good friends, but honestly, to think about it, they're people that I just hang out with and have a good time with. And the relationship there is what it is. And it's really fun, and I'm not downplaying it, but those are not the deep, meaningful relationships. The ones that I have opened up with and shared with, and they have done the same with me. And we have shared our struggles and our life hurts and our life harms with each other. And those are the bonding moments that really take a friendship to that deeper level. And it's true in, like you just said, yeah, it is absolutely true in any relationship. And the people in my life that I've lost that has hurt the most, those obviously hurt. Those people's death hurt me the most because of the bond that I have. And that bond was created through our sharing of hurt and harm. Luckily, not harms that we have committed toward each other, but the harms that we have experienced from others on us. Very good point.
Okay, so I suppose I should quickly make notes about the sexual stimulation from a masochistic standpoint, because I am, in fact, a masochist.
I was waiting for that.
For each masochist, yes, we enjoy pain, but there are different types of pain. So the stimulation that we experience, how we interpret it, depends on the type of pain and our own preferences to that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that we enjoy the most are the ones that we get the greatest endorphin spike from, and therefore give us the greatest pleasure. So learn what your masochist likes and what they don't like, and use them accordingly, because if you use a type of pain that they don't like, it can go from a pleasureful hurt to a painful harm.
Yeah, and if you're using a type of pain that they don't like, then Some would say that is automatically harm. Some would say.
Yeah, some would say.
And that's one of those things where it depends.
Yeah, it does. It depends. There have been certain master in my past who used a type of pain that I wasn't necessarily fond of, but still accepting of, and consenting to as punishment. And I don't find it harmful. Yeah. So I can definitely say from an eyewitness perspective that it does depend on the person and the situation.
Going back to what you said, my trainee, very, very interestingly divided, more so than anybody that I've ever met, in the different types of hurt and what it does to her. Knife play or needle play is very sexually stimulating to her. Like, it turns her on to the point where she will almost beg for sexual release. Impact play, totally different feeling. Totally different. She really doesn't like it in the moment. She can't stand it. She pushes herself to endure it because the next day she feels so much lighter. It takes her to that cathartic, if she can let go and fall into the experience, it takes her to that state of catharsis. And I haven't seen her drift completely into it. And when she does, it's going to be absolutely amazing for her. But she does hit it in a mild way when she'll allow herself to let go. And then for the next day, 4 or 5 days, she just feels lighter, and it's just a totally different thing. So in talking about hurt and hurt being a good thing for us, it's also important to realize that not every hurt is going to bring catharsis. Not every hurt is going to bring growth, and not every hurt is going to give you a psychological stimulation or a sexual stimulation. Now, it is going to give you a physical stimulation, and that is okay. And that's why it's good to experience things very slowly so that you can discern between what this particular hurt does and what this particular hurt does, or this type of play, or in this case, you can exchange hurt for types of play. But what is this particular type of play going to do? Is like knife play. Is that going to send you into a sexual craving fiend all of a sudden, like it does for some? Or is that going to go into fear play from maybe a traumatic event that you've experienced? And because of your trust in the person performing this knife play on you, is that going to take you into a cathartic place? Because it lets you fall into a place of safety where in the past it was a place of harm and torment and psychological stress, these types of things. So that's another reason, because we hit on frenzy a lot, and that's another very important reason to slow down with that and make sure that you're living in the moment, not jumping into something and 5 seconds into it, you're thinking about, okay, check the watch because this is probably going to last about 20, maybe 30 minutes, and then I can go hit the next PlayStation at this dungeon.
I think you just hit on the reason why I don't let any bottoms have watches or clocks in the room for any scene. Very nicely, without even meaning to.
Yep. Yes, time should not exist in a play space.
Nope.
All right, so that wraps up stimulation very well, I think, unless you've got anything else to add there.
Nope. Let's go ahead and talk about your next point.
My next bullet point of this presentation would be change. From the very first time that we play, hurt experience from BDSM can bring on both short and long-term changes. As we experience, we push ourselves, and we grow. The major changes become fewer and farther between, but the changes that have occurred become hard-coded in us as time passes. These changes are often very personal and usually aren't even recognized until weeks or even years later, if we ever recognize them. But they can be simple things like the way that we present ourselves, to our entire belief system about ourselves, others, or how the world works. In other words, our entire worldview and character can benefit from BDSM hurt. Fun size?
I feel like that goes back to what I said about how hurt helps with our life experiences, the things that we endure, the trials we go through, the lessons we learn from those That's essentially what you're talking about, is those changes that are coming from those experiences as part of our personal journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess that's pretty much going to wrap up the conversation about hurt. And we'll save our final thoughts there on hurt as a whole after we discuss harm. So you have me take the hurt. Do you want to take the harm?
I certainly can. So what I want to talk about with harm is why harm is bad for us. Simply put, harm is abuse. Even though sometimes it is accidental, it's still abuse. And we talked about this a great deal in our part 2 of Consents and Boundaries episode, which can be found at the crypt for episode 135. The link is in the show notes. But a brief rundown of this is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, physical, psychological, and sexual harm are things that we typically have control over, whether or not they occur. So to have something that we've consented to taken away and then we're automatically harmed by the things that we haven't consented to is very harmful to our person. If you've got someone wrapped with a flogger, single tail, or other implement, then you've harmed them. They consented to be struck on one area of their body and you have struck another, even by accident. And that can be extremely damaging, both physically and mentally. Yes, it's usually okay if it's made known very quickly that you acknowledge what you've done. You apologize, you make amends, but the harm's still there and it can still become a trigger for later on. So check-ins are important. Apologies, owning your actions are important, as we've discussed before. And it's important to understand that the person didn't consent to the actual harm that you've done, whether accidental or not. So you have to be aware of these things and then don't do it again. But regardless of the level of harm that we intentionally or unintentionally inflict on someone, all of us need to strive for perfection in this area and be hyper aware of our actions and the effects we have on someone. The other thing about harm that we haven't talked about is the limits of what defines harm versus hurt. And I want to quickly throw in a note here before we wrap up our show when it comes to harm, because there are some things that create lasting changes in someone that are harmful to their person, that people don't necessarily think to add to their limits until it happens to them or someone they know, because it seems unthinkable. Limb removal. Unfortunately, there are some that seem to think it would be okay to cut off someone's arm or leg. Hair removal. I actually knew a submissive that had a complete mental breakdown after her partner shaved her head as a punishment, and her hair was down to her knees beforehand, and it removed part of her identity and was very harmful.
Wow.
Yeah, things of this nature can be extremely harmful. So when you're talking to a partner and doing a negotiation, you need to hit every single point, even the things that you find unimaginable. I've had people come to me and they go, well, why is nail and hair and teeth removal on your list of hard limits? Because I don't want to risk it. So I will say that that's the big thing that you need to think about, is even the things that you find unimaginable that can never happen, even with a partner you absolutely trust, because your limits matter. And even if you don't think that that limit needs to be stated, it does to remove yourself from the possibility of harm.
Yeah. On that, the intelligent way to address something that hasn't been stated one way or the other is that you don't go near it when you're in a scene, but not everybody plays by that rule.
Yeah.
It's like the whole conversation going on with Me Too and consent counts and giving enthusiastic affirmative consent. And yes means yes, not no means no, which is the way that it's always been. You know, that's always been the saying, no means no. But with enthusiastic consent, it is not no means no. It is yes means yes. Just because you're doing something to me and I'm not telling you no doesn't mean that I'm actually enjoying it. It means that you haven't given me the opportunity. And if I was a bottom and I was in headspace, and something that I don't think that we've ever said, but new and old members of this lifestyle and community and fun little hobby that we have. Some people just thinking about, say it's Saturday night, and they're just thinking about, okay, tonight's dungeon night. We're going to a play space. That puts them in a headspace where they are not fit to be negotiating a scene. So negotiating with someone in a dungeon can often be a bad thing. They may agree to do things that they didn't want to do, really, but they agree to it because they were already on the verge or already fully into subspace. So yeah, that's just a little side note. But wait for a yes in your negotiations if it's not been talked about. And I have said this many times before, and so is fun size. But a negotiation doesn't take place during the scene. That is something that happens leading up to it. And if it hasn't been talked about, no matter how bad you want to do it, stay away from it. It's not yours to do until it's been said that it's yours to do. So which I actually have a massive phobia of dentists. And so you talking about tooth removal, that freaks me out. But for a second, I'm going to chill my stomach and I'm going to pretend that I have that fetish. And if you and I were playing and you failed to mention that, then just because you didn't tell me that, that doesn't mean that it's okay for me to do. So now, and even if you did tell me that, because safe, sane, consensual, risk-aware, consensual kink, I wouldn't consider removing someone's tooth a safe or sane thing to do. But yeah, just my own little side note and soapbox, enthusiastic affirmative consent.
I want to throw something out there as far as the enthusiastic, and this is for dominants to watch because it is something that I have experienced in moments of frenzy, being the masochist that I am. I am always looking to push the limit of the hurt that I can endure. And I feel like a lot of masochists get into this boat when they hit frenzy, where you're looking to push the envelope, you're looking to see how much more you can take. And you'll be saying, yes, 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 do this, it's going to hurt more, do it. You're being enthusiastic, you're giving consent. But from the dominant standpoint, you have to know that some of the things that they're asking for during their frenzy are not going to be safe. They're not going to be sane. And even though they're saying enthusiastically, yes, giving consent, it doesn't mean that you should do it.
On that will send me into a momentary frenzy.
Yep.
As a top. And I think, I know for a fact that you will agree with that when you have a bottom underneath your hand, so to speak, and you're playing them and they are really getting into it and being that enthusiastic about things, go to a harsher toy, give me more, push my limits, whatever. It's not, I say the top in me, it's really the sadist in me. Over the years, I've had to really hone my self-awareness so that I don't harm someone in moments like that. And I've ended scenes because someone was overly enthusiastic about me pushing them. And I knew that I would go too far if I did. To that own self be true kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So self-awareness, and a lot of people that I've met, and this is going to sound bad, but they think that they're self-aware and they talk about, I'm this and I'm that. And what I've kind of learned over the years is people who are truly self-aware, they don't want to teach you from a standpoint of, look at all the perfect things that I've done. They want to teach you from the standpoint of, here are all the mistakes that I've made. Please don't make them. Learn from my experience and hear what I have to say and don't make them. And it's not in a braggy attitude. There's always a touch of remorse in their voice. So if you're listening to yourself talk and you realize that, you kind of have what I typically consider around here a redneck attitude about things, and you're coming out more braggy than remorseful about a time that you've harmed someone or done something that you shouldn't have done, an accident, you really need to self-check, because that means that you're way more prone to harm someone intentionally or unintentionally than others who actually are self-aware. And I hope that doesn't offend anybody. It's not my intention. truly this time. Normally I don't care, to be honest. But with this kind of, and I have a friend that's very much this way, is why I say this. And often when you point things out to this person like this, because of their attitude and that rednecky mentality that they have, it's an automatic defense mindset that they go into. And no, that's not me. I don't do that. And, if you automatically go to defense, that's another sign. Maybe we need to work on taking a little criticism. And all this does very much relate. This is not a side note. This is on topic, because we have to be self-aware when it comes to hurt versus harm. Fun size?
I think you stated it really well, adding to what I had said about being conscientious about enthusiastic consent.
Why, thank you.
I will also say that as far as hurt versus harm and consent goes, you have to remember too that anytime we go into a scene, we are in an altered headspace, so we cannot give real true consent in those moments, and that's why you have to negotiate your own definition of what hurts and what harms are acceptable, and hopefully no harms are acceptable to you.
Yeah, and that is very much, you said something, define it for ourselves. That is so true. There is someone on FetLife that I follow, Out for Blood, I think is her name. And
sounds fun.
Oh my God. It was her 30th birthday. She got 30 licks from 30 people, or was going to, with whatever implement they wanted to use, and most people use single tail. So we're talking 900 hits, and she posted pictures, and I think they had to quit around 600 because she was completely covered, pouring blood, and it was splattering too much. And for her, that was hurt. She was disappointed that she couldn't continue because of the bloodborne pathogen risks. But for others, that would very much be harm. And that is where RAC comes into play, risk-aware consensual kink. She knew what she was getting into, and she wanted it. But you take my trainee, as I stated earlier, and you do some, even bring up the idea of that. Yeah. And when I saw the picture of her, I was actually out to dinner with, it was at a munch. And so I showed it to my wife, and then I showed it to my trainee, and it made her physically ill, not because of the blood. She doesn't have a problem with blood at all, but just the amount of damage that was done. And so for her, that would absolutely be harm. So it is individual. But that scene, one of the things that she commented on, because I think it hit F&P, is that the name of it? F&P?
I think so.
Or P&K, popular and kinky, or I can't remember. But anyway, one of the comments, or a lot of the comments that she was talking about, was how well negotiated and planned that it was. And I don't even think that it was her intention to use it as an educational tool. People were just asking questions, and she was just answering them. But there was so much education wrapped up in what she had to say about how it was a planning process that started 6 months before her birthday. And every single person was someone that she had played with before. They were people that she trusted. Even though this immense amount of damage was going to be done to her body, it had to be done by people that she trusted, because you could still go too far. What if somebody's favorite toy was a chainsaw or a weed whacker?
Jesus, I don't even like to think of it, but I know there are people out there that will go there.
I do know someone whose favorite toy is a weed whacker.
I will not be sinning with them.
And they have found a very creative way, and they've got one of those heads with 3 little inserts for strings, and they'll take silk claws, and they've come up with some way where it doesn't get all just tied up together. So it's really an interesting toy that they've made, but there is no way I would ever let that be used on anybody that I cared about. And I've seen it used on people that I didn't know, and they loved it, and it created some damage. And these were some very quote unquote heavy players, but it wasn't near what it would have been if there was the little plastic strings in there. But yeah, no, negotiate, folks, and really take your time to do it. What are your final thoughts on this? I know we've kind of already gone toward wrapping it up a little bit, but
I think we've done a really good job of talking about hurt versus harm, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, how to handle it. So I think we're good.
Yeah, I do too. It's a topic that I love to talk about because it's a very important one. And there's a lot of fun things in it when you're talking about hurt. For me, I guess the main difference between hurt and harm would be the negotiation to bring it down to just a simple term, what has been approved and what hasn't, whether it's going to be for just that brief moment, like a wrap of an implement that is not a lasting one. And that does not give you permission to do it intentionally. You sadists out there like me, I've only wrap someone. There is one person that I do wrap intentionally, but strangely enough, that's been negotiated. They kind of enjoy it, but that's the only person that I would ever intentionally wrap. And the point is to not do that, to practice your art, to master your skills and work on it, not just in a play space, but on a daily basis so that you don't end up unintentionally harming someone. And if you are the person that does this intentionally, please walk away. Leave us alone. Don't ruin our fun. We've got enough working against us in this over-religious world that we live in the United States, and we don't need other people adding fuel to the fire, giving us a bad name. So a little soapbox there. On another topic, so last night I did my first live broadcast at kuldrinscript.com/live. And I know you had to work and didn't find out about it before it was starting, really, and
yeah,
you couldn't be there. But
sadly,
yes, you were asked about.
Oh,
And somebody was very concerned. Well, where's Fun Size? And I explained to them, and as soon as I said the burnout episode, they're oh, okay, in the chat, like, yeah, okay, I get it. But hopefully in the future, maybe someday you can join in. There was a lot of technical difficulties last night, as it was the first one. I had a major bandwidth issue that I didn't know about. Nobody told me about it, and I found out when it was over. So I am going to publish the episode as a podcast episode through the regular feed, so that'll come through to your device, however you listen. But if you want to go ahead and watch it, you can go to our YouTube channel and check it out there. There's links in the show notes for the YouTube channel. All right. We need to thank some very special people. These are our producers, our executive producer, Jeff, Jeremiah, and Silas, our senior producers, Matt and Jeremy, producers, Kane Sin, Danny, a.k.a. Princess Puddles, and Heather. And finally, our junior producers, K2SO, Irish Mountain Dragon, Fun Size's very own husband, and Buffalo Dom 84. As he would say, I saved the best for last. If you would like to become one of our show producers, go to our website, kuldrinscript.com, click on the support tab, and you will find all that information. Second, BDSMcontracts.org. They donate some beautiful 25-page soft and hardbound MS and DS contracts. Go to BDSMcontracts.org. Use the coupon code Kuldrin20. That's KULDRIN20. No spaces. You'll receive a 20% discount off of all purchases. And finally, whippingstripes.com. My personal maker of all things leather and paracord impact toys. Amazing people, no discount codes. They don't pay us anything. They really are just my personal maker, and I love them. They do custom orders. They got standard stuff. Check them out. Next time on The Crypt, we're going to get into details about BDSM in marriage, something that both of us has a lot of experience talking about, but it is different for everybody. So that is going to be an interesting conversation that I'm looking forward to hearing, because though we do talk a lot about how we're the same and how we're different in how it's handled within our marriages, we're going to take a deep dive on that, and that's going to be fun. I think it's going to help a lot of people because there's a lot of questions that come out about that one. In the meantime, go to kuldrinscript.com for show notes, how to subscribe information, and a link to our FetLife group, so you can take part of the conversation over there and be eligible for giveaways. And speaking of giveaways, I gave away a Kuldrin's Crypt BDSM 101 podcast paddle last night to Lady Katie. She was the winner of the drawing.
Congratulations.
And I will be getting that to her. See what happens when you show up for the live shows. I won't do that every time, but I do have a few more things to give away. I'm going to get in touch with bdsmcontracts.org and see. I've only got one more of those contracts left to give out. So I'm going to get with her and see if she'll send me some more. But while you are there at kuldrinscrypt.com, click on the Support Us tab, become one of our Patreon supporters. You'll find all of our contact information there, email addresses, FetLife group, Facebook, links to Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, PayPal, the limits and interest survey. If you haven't taken that, jump on that. And that's going to do it. This has been Master Kuldrin and Fun Size for kuldrinscrypt.com. Unearth the truth.